So starting out, these are, this is essentially how to reach me. I would love to connect on LinkedIn afterward or maybe on Twitter, X. I also post a weekly X space on Thursday evenings, so you can check that out at Zoe Braiterman if you'd like to contact. I am a researcher and consultant and educator at the intersection of data science and software security. So overall, the general categories of what I'll review today, again, at a high level, um, go into more depth in some of my other types of sessions. But security, I like it to keep it kind of open conversation. So use cases of using AI for cybersecurity, limitations of AI, and AI security risks and AI security defenses. So some use cases. So each of you who spoke already, gave some examples of how you use it on a regular basis or not, or like, very specific basis, depending. So this is one, ChatGPT generated phishing email example. Examples and phishing simulations are often used in cybersecurity awareness trainings in order to have a practical component that allows, employees within a company or individuals to be able to identify phishing emails in real time. So a bunch of these are given by one of the training platforms, and it varies. There are a lot of good training platforms out there that use these phishing simulations. So here I used ChatGPT to generate one for a training that I developed because I didn't have access to a platform and I wanted to give a free community training. So here, artificial intelligence helps to recognize certain keywords and red flags, which I've marked here in red because red flag stands out. So terms like urgent, terms like unusual activity detected on your account, which really facilitates some sense of urgency for a user to react, often leading to some sort of malware or something the attacker wants the employee to do that is not safe. So already, just with one single prompt asking to generate an example of a phishing email, it generated an entire email with these red flags. So as the instructor, I facilitated the instructions and the discussion around this, but in order to generate this specific example, I didn't have to come up with on my own. So it speeds things up, it makes things more efficient. And so using AI for education around AI is kind of a big topic now because you can, reference resources from around the internet and various sources quickly and efficiently. And you can also make interactive lessons for learners. And it could be professional learners, students within a university. And one fun fact about AI for education in general is that I've seen relatives or friends who are professors in non-technical fields don't know how to identify whether certain papers or other deliverables that are or assignments that are written by students were actually written by the students. So sometimes it's hard for them to tell. But then sometimes it's kind of easy because ultimately they can craft their questions such that the answers kind of can't be faked. They make it harder by getting really specific, by throwing in little hints, or just little nuances that can really help distinguish who really wrote things. one thing is, you really, well, depending on the model, it can learn from the user's type of writing and, continue to build off of that. But ultimately, it can't fully recognize your unique perspective, your unique writing or conversational style. So that's one way that if somebody knows the user, then they can kind of tell. So, and accuracy, depending on the context, could have direct implications for security. Because if you're heavily reliant on the outputs being accurate and reliable, then that could be detrimental to security if there are flaws in that. So security training, again, you can also ask specific questions that are not generative per se, like generate an email, but just, asking for answers about ways to, for example, set up two-step verification for Google Workspace. And it gives you specific, typically up to date, but there's only one way to find out. Go to your Google Workspace if you're using it and try it out. But again, in terms of the prompts that you choose in order to get the best results, specify Google, specify whatever else you might be using. If you were to craft a prompt that said just how to set up two-factor authentication, then it wouldn't automatically know that you're referring to Google, and it might give you either the wrong platform or just something very general and therefore not useful because each vendor has their own setup. In fact, Google specifically uses the term two-step verification, whereas other vendors just use the term multi-factor authentication, or sometimes two-factor authentication. But I personally have only I've administered various systems, and I've only seen Google use the term two-step verification. So even my prompt here, if you recognize it, assume some sort of domain specific knowledge that I already know that Google uses the term two-step verification. So I've crafted my prompt accordingly, asking specifically about that. If it had been more general, you would have had to take more steps there to get there. You would have had to start by generally, like, general, how do you set up multi-factor authentication and see whether or not it asks you more specific questions, prompting you to get more specific about the system, or whether it just spurts out something overly general. And again, you have to carefully examine the output and customize accordingly. Kind of like Andrea was mentioning before about the cover letters and resumes, how you always have to review it afterward for accuracy, for usefulness, and with accuracy comes security, especially if you're making decisions based on the outputs about whether or not an email is a phishing email, or another type of anomalous output. So vulnerability scan and anomaly detection. There are various tools used in various fields within security where the tooling is based on utilizes AI in order to, for example, classify spam, recognize known vulnerabilities in software. Sneak is a great example of that. It's very, very useful. It comes with various ways to implement it. You can use it from your code editor, or you can also use it directly within a GitHub action for those of you familiar with development pipelines. And it's just generally useful, and I like dogs. But it utilizes AI to, detect vulnerabilities with examples generated by security researchers so that it knows how to identify specific flaws and vulnerabilities within specific languages or development frameworks.